And good afternoon. Welcome into Helping Seniors of Brevard here on 90.3 FM. I'm John Harper. Kind of a different type of show today because I'm going to be hosting, and co-hosting with me is Jim Votro. Of course, Jim and myself do the Information Overload Hour on Mondays and Fridays at 12 to 1 o'clock, and we're happy to be sitting in right now. Carrie Fink is on assignment, and incoming president Jennifer Barton is on assignment as well. And so JV, Jim, and myself are kind of filling in, and it takes two of us, I guess, to fill in for Jennifer. She is such a dynamic individual, and happy to have her as the incoming president of Helping Seniors of Brevard. And Carrie Fink is doing such a great job as well.
John, this is Jim Votro, and I am very happy to be here with our wonderful attorney, Bill Johnson, who is a perfect guy who absolutely knows everything about law, especially when it comes to elder law. And Bill he's been a really remarkable friend of mine for a number of years, and I'm sure he's been a remarkable number of everybody, because you head up the elder law division of I think it's a state bar. Is it not correct, Bill?
I did for a little bit.
Just a little bit. Today we're going to talk a lot about guardianship. When you need one, when you don't need one, how to get one, and how to fight one. So, Bill, let me turn it over to you.
Okay. When we talk about guardianship, most people have no idea what a guardianship is. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is really to go through why somebody would need a guardianship, how the process works, and then we can talk about how you fight it or how you can avoid it is usually the best solution. But guardianship is generally a legal proceeding where we are trying to get somebody declared either partially or totally incapacitated. And then what we would like to do is have a guardian put in charge of that person's financial and medical affairs. So we file a petition with the court asking the court, it's called a petition to determine incapacity. And when we file that, two things happen. One is the court appoints a 3-member examining committee to go out and examine the individual. And that examining committee is composed of a doctor and usually 2 other healthcare professionals. And the court will also appoint an attorney to represent that individual, just to make sure they're not being railroaded through the system. Now, the individual who we're looking at, they're free to hire their own attorney if they want. They don't have to go with the court-appointed attorney. Mm-hmm. And the examining committee will go out and examine the person, and then they report back to the court whether that person is partially, totally, or not at all incapacitated.
Can the state do that, Bill?
Well, the court system does that.
Well, I mean, can the state, like an estate agency, come in and say, I think Joe Blow needs some help?
They could be a petitioner, yes. And that has occurred when we have people who, that DCF, Adult Protective Services, has deemed that they need assistance and there is no family to step up. Then at times they can be a petitioner to get a professional guardian appointed for somebody if there is no other alternative.
Well, most of these guardians are, relatives. Is that not correct?
Most of the time it is a family member, either a spouse or the children, somebody like that. And usually, let's go back. Why would you file a guardianship? Well, if you have somebody you know who is not doing well, they've been either financially exploited or they're not taking care of themselves from a medical standpoint or a social standpoint, and they seem to be declining, then we would, if they didn't have, and we talk about it all the time in the program, if they did not have a durable power of attorney or a healthcare surrogate document where they designate somebody to manage their finances and take care of their health care, then generally the only way we can get somebody appointed to do that, if they're unable to execute documents anymore, is to go through the guardianship proceeding. So let me give you an example. We have a married couple. Husband gets Alzheimer's disease. Wife wants to get into the 401, his 401k, to pay for the care costs. Well, if the husband has not given her the authority with a durable power of attorney, well, then she is stuck doing a guardianship. So, and when the examining committee, in Florida, we have a system of looking at whether or not somebody's able to do activities. It is, kind of means tested. Are they able to do these different tasks? And if not, these ones need to be taken from them and placed with the guardian to perform. And what are those different things we're looking to place with the guardian? Things like the right to have a driver's license, right to vote, right to marry, right to prosecute or defend a lawsuit, right to enter into a contract, right to seek employment, right to determine their social setting, right to determine their residency, right to determine medical care, those kinds of things. And whatever the examining committee deems the person's incapable of doing, usually those rights then, the ones that can be delegated, are placed with the guardian to perform those tasks on behalf of the individual. Now, you can't delegate the right to vote, so a guardian can't vote for you. And you can't delegate the right to have a driver's license either. But other than that, most of the other rights are delegated to the guardian.
So if I were an 83-year-old man, chances are that somebody could object to my marrying a 17-year-old beautiful girl.
Well, they could. Now, if you're a 80-something-year-old man marrying a 17-year-old girl and you're of perfectly sound mind, you're free to do whatever you want. It is only, guardianship's only for people who are compromised. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you're not compromised mentally in some way or physically, it could be physically too, then guardianship is not the solution. So if I want to go on top of the bridge, crumple up all the money in my pocket and throw it over the side of the bridge, I have all the right to do that except for littering. But if I'm of sound mind, I can do whatever I want. It's only when the person has diminished capacity that we start to looking into guardianship.
Bill, would you kind of define what is diminished capacity and what is sound mind?
Well, like I said, in Florida, we view a diminished capacity based on your ability to do the tasks. Mm-hmm. Manage your healthcare, manage your finances, those kinds of things. It's very task-oriented. The examining committee actually has to perform not only a physical examination, they have to do a mental examination. So they are going to usually administer certain tests, like the mini mental status exam, the St. Louis University mental status exam, and there's a few other ones, which generally measure memory, executive function, the ability to make good decisions, and things like that.
I'm really kind of curious about all those little tests that they give. I mean, I'm 78 years old, mm-hmm. and I'm sitting there saying, well, wait a minute now, I may have diminished capacity. I walk in the kitchen, I don't remember what I came there for, but that happens to all of us, Bill. I mean,
correct. There's a difference between dementia and just becoming older and more forgetful.
I think that's really good to know at this point.
Yeah.
Basically, Bill, what is the best time to sit there and determine whether or not, for the individual to determine whether or not they need guardianship? I mean, that is really an important thing if you're participating in that, right?
Yes, generally it is rare for the individual who is suffering from whatever, either dementia, or it could, like I said, it could be a physical ailment too. But generally, we're dealing with dementias and maybe psychoses and schizophrenia and things like that, bipolar, mental incapacities. The biggest one's usually dementia. But yeah, usually that individual lacks what we call insight. Mm-hmm. So, like if you go to a hoarder's house, they don't think they're hoarding. You know, they're in denial. They don't have the insight that somebody from the outside, when they look in, goes, "Whoa, we got a problem here." Mm-hmm. I mean, I've had cases where we've had to do guardianships where people have been targeted by scammers and literally sent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to the scammers before we even could step in and stop it. But they, you know, if you ask them, oh no, there's nothing wrong with this. They're going to deliver this check for $1 million to me in several weeks.
I know that Nigerian prince. I really do.
So those are some of the bigger cases where it's fairly cut and dry. You know, somebody's been taken advantage of, or for example, on the medical side, you go to the house smells of urine, the carpets are all stained, nobody's vacuumed or cleaned, you know, and the person's not taking their meds and that kind of thing. So generally, you know, we're looking for things where people are at risk of financial exploitation, or they're also at risk of injury to themselves or others.
Well, that's certainly a very good reason to have a guardian if you're not capable of handling yourself. Bill, what are some of the other reasons that one might want a guardian or have a guardian?
Well, one is there's court oversight. So guardians are overseen by the court. If they take over your finances, they got to do an accounting. They have to do an inventory, what your assets are at the beginning of the guardianship, and then they have to account for everything that comes in and goes out. So there is court oversight. Whereas your power of attorney, they don't have to account to anybody. So that can be problematic. Also, sometimes we have to do a guardianship even if you've done your incapacity planning. So, for example, say I name my son as my power of attorney to manage my finances, and then I have him also as my healthcare surrogate to manage my healthcare, and then later we discover he's been using the power of attorney to steal money from me. Obviously, then we have to stop that. And one of the ways we stop that is we file a guardianship, and that kind of halts the power of attorney.
And there's never a problem with a guardian, right?
No, there are problems with guardians. There's been several high-profile guardianship cases in the news, but I would tell you it's
rare.
Yeah, it's few and far between. There's not a huge crisis that maybe the media would lead you to believe.
Well, Bill, it's not necessarily one of those things where it's a bad thing to have a guardian. I mean, it's really a good thing to make sure that you your health is taken care of and that you're taken care of for the rest of your life, especially when you cannot.
Correct. And like I said, there is court oversight of that, or at least reporting to the court. And our clerk of court goes through those accountings with a fine-tooth comb, looks at the plans for the health care. So I didn't finish, but once the examining committee report's filed, then we have a hearing on who's going to be the guardian. If only one person's thrown their name in the ring to be your guardian, generally tag it's it. And to be a guardian, you basically have to be over 18, able to carry out the duties, and cannot have a felony conviction. A felony conviction automatically disqualifies you. So sometimes what happens is we have a parent who gets ill, doesn't have any documents, so we never named a power of attorney or a healthcare surrogate. And then one of the kids files for guardianship. We find the person's incapacitated. And then we get to the stage of who's going to be the guardian. And we may have 3 or 4 competing petitions, meaning the kids don't get along and they all want to be the one in charge. So if that happens, we have what we call a contested guardianship. And generally we end up having a trial to resolve who would be the guardian.
Well, Bill, how long does this all take? I mean, I'm just wondering. I mean, this seems like it takes, it would take quite a while.
That's a great question. So start to finish, we're probably looking at least 60 days or so. However, if there is an emergency, we can file a petition for the appointment of an emergency temporary guardian, and we can have a hearing, generally 7 to 10 days, and get somebody appointed temporarily till the final hearing as a temporary guardian. We do have to prove that there is an emergency, and that is generally defined as an imminent loss of property or imminent loss or harm to the individual.
Bill, when they are appointed as a guardian, when someone is appointed as a guardian, do they charge for that service? I mean, obviously they're doing services for these people.
They can. Generally, family members do not. However, professional guardians do. Generally, they charge up to $75 an hour. Most of them have breakdowns for different tasks. So when they're acting as the guardian, it's $75 an hour. If they're just doing administrative work, putting stamps on envelopes, that kind of thing, usually they don't charge the $75.
What does it take to become a professional guardian?
Well, to be a professional guardian, you got to go through a criminal background check. You also have to take a 40-hour course that goes through what you have to do and the various roles and tasks of that. You also have to file a bond, a permanent bond. I think it's in the amount of $50,000 now. And you also have to pass a test. They do test you on the course materials. And then lastly, you have to register with the Office of Public and Professional Guardians.
Wow.
And that is the oversight authority for either public or professional guardians.
Are there a lot of these guardians around there, or can your lawyer, could I come to you and say, Bill, I want you to be guardian for my Uncle Saz over here? Can I do that?
You can have up to, I think it's either 2 or 3 guardianships if you're not a professional. If you go over that, you have to become a professional. So you technically could have somebody that is not a professional guardian being a guardian over somebody. I've done that once, I think.
How do you find these guardians, these professional guardians? How do you find them?
If you go to the Office of Public and Professional Guardianship, OPPG is the abbreviation. They have a listing by county of all the professional guardians in each county who are registered.
And obviously lawyers such as yourself would also be able to reach them, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
That would be the way I would go. I wouldn't trust myself to go out and find a professional guardian that I had no knowledge of or anything like that. So.
Yeah, for example, I belong to the now defunct Space Coast Guardianship Association, and I say defunct because it just merged with the other guardianship, which is the Florida State Guardianship Association, and we have monthly meetings and things like that.
Well, it makes a lot of sense there.
So yeah, and we have continuing education. Generally, at those meetings, we'll have presenters and things like that.
So things change all the time when you're a professional guardian, or I mean, the laws change up in Tallahassee and whatever.
That's a great. Ironically, at those group meetings every month, because I'm on the legislative committee for the elder law section of the bar, I get to do the update. So I get to tell them what's currently in the hopper, what might pass, what might not pass, and then at the end, after session ends, generally we do once the bills are signed, kind of a recap of what passed, and if there's anything specific to guardianship that they need to know.
Mm-hmm. Well, these professional guardians have continuing education as well.
They do. They have to do, I don't know exactly how many hours, but yes, they have to keep going. There's also the Florida State Guardianship Association holds an annual convention where they offer a lot of those courses where guardians can get their continuation credits on different breakout sessions. And then at our meetings, we actually, for different speakers, apply for the ability to get them credit for the whatever the presentation's on.
Well, Bill, you're very much involved in the whole process of elder law, guardianship, et cetera. But well, I'm curious, what is the? I guess we're going to talk about this probably a little bit later, but I really would like you to kind of recant maybe the strangest guardianship situation that you've had as a lawyer.
Oh,
And
I've had some doozies.
well, we're going to get back to that right after we take our mid-show break here.
It's 12:35 right here on 90.3 FM, helping seniors of Brevard for this Wednesday afternoon. I'm John Harper, along with Jim Votro and attorney Bill Johnson. I think we could listen to that music for the next half hour. It's good stuff. We always enjoy that.
Oh, we always do enjoy that. We really do.
That's right. We get a lot of nice comments about that.
We do.
Gentlemen, let's get back to Jim Votro, your interesting conversation with Bill Johnson.
Well, we were talking before the break. We were talking about guardianship before the break, and basically one of the things we had asked Bill is what were some of the strangest guardianship situations that he has encountered in his many years of being an elder law practicing attorney.
One that jumps to mind is I had a child of a gentleman come to the office and tell me that their parent was incapacitated, and showed me a letter from that person's physician that says the person's incapable of managing their affairs due to having, I think, vascular dementia. So we start down the path of doing the guardianship, and because there was, or at least they told me there was a perceived danger to the person, we filed an emergency temporary petition and got them appointed, or got the person appointed on an emergency basis. The reason this one was so bizarre is I later found out that they had gone over to their parents' house and had basically put him in an assisted living and taken all these items from the house, which generally, sometimes happens. We defer to families a lot on those kinds of decisions.
I would imagine.
Then my phone gets a call, and it's another attorney screaming at me that his client, the gentleman who's supposedly incapacitated, is not incapacitated at all. And how could I have done this, and so forth and so on. And I said, well, I have a letter from a doctor that says that he's, incapacitated. He's got dementia, and I don't know what you're talking about. So as soon as that phone call ended, I got on the phone, called up the doctor's office, and said, hey, this guy came to see you, and you wrote this letter that he's incapacitated, can't manage his financial affairs and all that. And the doctor tells me, I never saw the person. I only wrote that letter because the daughter told me this was what was going on. So he had written this letter, and he had never even talked to the patient. And I said, do you realize what you set in motion here? And needless to say, at the end of the day, the child got arrested.
Really?
Yeah, because of the fraud they had committed and also the theft of the items from the house. So that was kind of eye-opening. I wouldn't think a physician would write a letter telling me that somebody's, got dementia and can't manage their affairs if they haven't even
Right.
interviewed the patient.
I would imagine that that his medical license could be at issue with that kind of a letter.
Yes, I would think so too.
So, I'm really, again, I'm more curious in some of the real situations that you've had, just like the one you've just mentioned. That was probably the strangest one you had. Have you had any that were more like urgent?
Well, we've had a whole bunch of what I'll call wars, where we've been involved with the kids fighting over everything, to the tune of some of them $300,000 in attorney's fees.
Wow, is that common? Is that a real common thing?
It's not that common. A lot of times we try to prevent that. Like, if one side says, no way you're going to be the guardian, and the other side says, no way you're going to be the guardian, then sometimes what we propose is let's have a professional guardian that's neither of you do, and, put a neutral party in charge. So sometimes we diffuse that way. Other people just want to fight.
If there's money, I can understand. If there's no money, what's the difference? If there's no money, but you still have to have a professional guardian, I would imagine that, that's still worth fighting for if you have certain feelings about your parent.
Correct. And sometimes it boils down to one person has a particular view on what medical care the person gets, and the other person has a different view. Or, again, somebody just wants to be in charge of the money. I think you've heard on this show that I've talked ad nauseum about how this generation of people retiring does not have sufficient assets saved for retirement. There are no more, pensions are few and far between.
Sounds like me.
And so most people are looking at getting their inheritance as a way of surviving in retirement. And so this all blows up in the guardianship arena because you have the kids fighting over who's going to be in charge of that money and how it's spent even before the person dies.
I'm astounded by that, but I guess that is human nature to a certain degree. I guess we guardianship is a lot about human nature, is it not?
Correct.
Okay. Bill, when somebody is starting to feel like they're getting into that incapacitated area, should they try and sit down with an attorney or someone to kind of, build that plan that you were talking about, getting your ducks in a row as Joe Steckler, our founder?
So one way to avoid a guardianship, I hope people who are listening have got this, is to have a durable power of attorney and a designation of healthcare surrogate, and preferably that you have had done while you're competent. You're not incapacitated, naming somebody to take over managing your finances and your health care should you become incapacitated. That's the simplest way to prevent ever having to do a guardianship. Those documents, if you go to a lawyer's office, will probably cost you a few $100s. But a guardianship costs somewhere around $10,000.
My goodness,
So
it's important.
yeah, you can imagine you have the attorney is petitioning, you have the court-appointed attorney, we have 3 medical people. You start adding up the dollar figures, and it gets kind of pricey pretty quick.
Well, when you said those professional guardians, they go through that whole process that you were explaining, and they cannot be a convicted felon.
Right.
What if someone were to have a son or a daughter who, by one reason or another, had a felony way back in their background? Could they still do the durable power of attorney?
They could do the durable power of
So
attorney.
that's
it
the way to
does
work
not
around that.
disqualify you from
Yeah.
that.
Okay. That's interesting, because in this day and age, who knows? It's really kind of a strange thing. Bill,
And sometimes, the people you name in your power of attorney and your healthcare surrogate later in life aren't the people you want in charge.
I can tell you that too. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those things those things really do need to be reviewed. And you can review that with your attorney. I mean, I wouldn't go down to Office Depot and buy one. I definitely get a human being that was in the city or in the town that I'm in. Like if you moved, for example, from New York or New Jersey or California, and you came here and you think you have all your documents, all your ducks in a row, you might find that your ducks are all over the place.
Right.
So
Right.
you really need to get into the situation where you sit down with your attorney and kind of make sure that all those ducks are in a row, so that your retirement, extended retirement, last days, golden years, whatever you want to call it, actually happens.
And you need to do that ahead of you becoming incapacitated. I mean, we get phone calls all the time. So-and-so's, got advanced dementia, and we just discovered that we don't have power of attorney. And I'm like, well, too late.
Yeah.
Now you're stuck in the guardianship circle.
Right. How much? We're talking about $10,000 for a guardianship. What's the average cost for like a power of attorney? And the usual power of attorney, will, the whole stuff.
Probably like $250 for the power of attorney, and same for the healthcare surrogate.
Wow, that's certainly, not only is it a big savings, but I mean, when you're coming down to the final wire, you're going to need every penny you got. So
Correct.
it's a really good idea, I think.
Now, one thing we haven't talked about is, once a guardian's been appointed for you, I mentioned they have to do an inventory and an annual accounting. They also have to, if they're on the medical side, guardian of the person, they have to file a plan of your care for the upcoming year. And also, they have to attach a letter to that plan that you're still incapacitated. Now, you can get out of a guardianship, and I've had the joy of doing multiple restoration of rights, basically, for people. Generally, it has involved people who've had traumatic brain injuries. So they've been in either a car accident, motorcycle accident, fallen off a ladder on their head, that kind of thing, where they are incapacitated at the time we do the guardianship, but the brain has an amazing way of rewiring itself. And later down the road, it may be years, but they regain the capacity to do those tasks, and we file what's called a suggestion of capacity, and they get reviewed by a doctor, and boom, we get them out of the guardianship.
But who generally does that? I mean, is it the individual, or is it?
Well, generally the individual. Sometimes their guardian will come to me and say, "Hey, this person doesn't need a guardianship anymore."
Really?
And so we file for a petition to be appointed as guardian.
Wow, that is really good. Human nature is good. I mean, when a guardian will come in, a guy or a woman who's possibly making $1.19 out of this thing is going to come up and say, I don't think they need this anymore.
And so, also the interesting thing, when a guardianship gets filed, say somebody filed for a petition to determine incapacity against me, and I get a court-appointed attorney, I can fight that. I don't have to just really, whatever the examining committee says goes. The court can consider other medical evidence.
Really?
So, I could go get a neurologist, psychiatrist to come in and testify on my behalf. The court-appointed attorney has to follow my directions. So if I say fight this, they have to fight this.
Bill, have you ever had a case like that? I mean, I would
Oh,
find
yeah.
that fascinating. You've actually had cases
Oh,
like
yeah,
that?
where we brought in psychiatrists and neurologists to testify on behalf of the person that they're not incapacitated.
Wow, it makes so much sense to basically to have the concept of having a guardian or guardianship, but it also makes sense to avoid it. And
Correct.
the best way to avoid it is to do what Joe Steckler's been saying, let's get your ducks in a row.
Yeah, generally, have the power of attorney and the healthcare surrogate. Generally, keep your financial affairs in order and go see your doctors and take your medicines and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. It really and truly does, Bill. I'm curious about other cases. I mean, I'm fascinated. It's not like Law and Order, so to speak, but I am fascinated by cases that things that have happened to people, and because I think it could happen to any of us at any given time. And I'm totally fascinated about some of your
It happens
experiences.
to people of all ages, too.
Really? Oh, well, yeah, I can
Yeah,
imagine.
so
yeah.
I've done guardianships on teenagers all the way to people in their hundreds.
Well, what was that one that the
Generally, with the younger people, it is some sort of medical related thing.
I was trying to think of there was some musical lady who was involved in a big guardianship tangle a while back with her father or something of that nature because
Oh, that was the case out in California.
right
Where he had Casey Kasem.
yeah, Casey Kasem.
Yeah, where he had remarried. He had a new spouse, and I've watched the documentary on that, and it's kind of wild. But she claimed that his wish was to be isolated from everybody, and she actually moved him several different states.
Right.
And the kids didn't know where Dad was, and
It got really wild there for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking of that. And, we don't hear much about guardianships. We don't hear much about guardianships, unless, we're somewhat involved or if it makes some big splash in the news,
Yeah, Britney Spears.
Britney
is
Spears is another
example.
one, yeah.
Yeah.
And well, I think she's out of her guardianship at this point, but
Correct,
going
but-
in or out.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe heading back into one. Depending on who you talk to.
Right. And
Right.
you're not just old like us, but honestly speaking, well, I shouldn't say like us because you're a young man. I can honestly tell you that there's a lot to think about when it comes down to keeping your ducks in the row. And protecting what you have. If you have built up any equity in your homes or anything of that nature, it's kind of important to protect that. But oftentimes, that ship's already sailed.
Right. So you need to do all this stuff ahead of time.
Right.
Before, you become incapacitated.
I think that's a really good idea. I think that what we're actually looking at in terms of guardianship in general is I'm looking at it from the standpoint of how can we avoid it, and if we can't avoid it, how can we best do it and easy on everybody. I think really it's probably a good idea to be very civil among all of our friends and our siblings and our children, but that doesn't always happen. Not at all.
Those contested guardianship cases where the kids don't get along, generally it is the ill will they've harbored to their siblings since they were children.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, but they think the guardianship case is the perfect forum to air all those grievances against each other.
It's not.
It's not, and it makes a mess, and it gets costly.
Well, the primary individual becomes a pawn in the old family chess game, and that's not really all good for anybody. So, well, Bill, I can honestly tell you that we've learned a lot here today. We actually have not only have we heard a couple of good stories about guardianship, but we've actually learned quite a bit. And I think the best thing that I've learned is I'm going to go out and get my power of attorney, my durable power of attorney, and I'm going to get that redone right away. So could you make an appointment at your office, Bill? What is that telephone number by any chance?
To get a hold of us, it's 321-253-1667.
And that's what we've got pretty much for what we're talking about here today. And we're going to talk to my good buddy John Harper here. And what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about this wonderful car auction that we have coming up, and the great things at Mark Pylock's museum, Automobile Museum. We're going to be talking about that. And John, I think we need to get on those tickets, don't you?
Well, I think so too, Jim Votro.
I think you can get those tickets at Bill Johnson's.
Yeah, we have them there.
Yeah, well, you can get some there too. So
good deal. Okay, Bill, thanks so much. And as Jim mentioned, great information this afternoon. And I know we gained a lot of knowledge from what you had to say. Knowledge is power, and that's what it's all about, right?
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Bill. And we appreciate Bill. We also thank Jim Votro for handling that interview for us. Bill Johnson has been a friend of ours for many years here on helping seniors of Brevard, going way back several years even before that with the Alzheimer's Foundation. So Bill is one of our favorites, and Jim, we thank you for handling that and good information.
Hey, listen, like I said, I've got really good information. I got good stuff. I'm going to go out and make that appointment with Bill Johnson, and I'm going to get my durable power of attorney done, and I'm going to try and avoid guardianship as much as I can, as long as I remember why I'm avoiding it. But
exactly.
Honestly, John, it's Bill contributes so much to this information overload that we have all the time, and helping seniors is just he's been such a good friend of helping seniors from day one.
He has.
Really has. So
good
really
guy.
Thanking Bill Johnson for coming in and talking about guardianship and how to avoid it.
And Jim Votro, we thank you for that as well. You've been listening to Helping Seniors of Brevard. We are heard every Wednesday, 12 noon to 1 o'clock, right here on 90.3 FM. Want to spend a moment here, Jim Votro, talking about the big car raffle coming up in October. This is going to be held at the American Muscle Car Museum. Jim, you were there last year, and it was quite an event.
Oh, it sure was. John, I'll tell you, I still want to ride around in the shoe. I want to ride around. They have a car that's a shoe. It's a lady's shoe. I want to ride around in that for a little bit. Honestly, they have cars there that you wouldn't expect. I mean, these $1 million vehicles.
Yeah.
Absolute $1 million vehicles. And it's awesome to watch. It's a wonderful thing. They had so many people there, they couldn't fit them all in the time, and they're going to change that this year so that people can get in there for a longer period of time, over a longer period of time.
Well, it's going to be on Sunday afternoon, and that way people will be able to experience the event outside of the American Muscle Car Museum and inside as well. That's going to help with crowd control, because last year it was really crowded. A lot of people came out for it. They enjoyed the Muscle Car Museum, and they enjoyed helping seniors of Brevard.
I think the person who won the car last year, I think they took an SUV, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know what cars. We've got all kinds of cars running this year. And all you can do is, stop by any of a lot of the places that
the Boniface hires car dealerships.
Right.
They have every one of their car dealerships involved, and you have a chance to win anything from a Chevy. I believe it's called a Chevy. I can't remember the name of it now. Anyway, it's a pickup truck.
You're going to get a Guardian. You're going to get a Guardian.
It's a pickup truck. You can get a Mazda Miata, number of different cars, all available for the purchase of a ticket to the American Muscle Car Museum. That comes up at the end of October, so make sure that you set your calendars for that on October the 7th, and we look forward to seeing you for the, I believe this will be the 8th annual auction that's going to be held at the museum. And Jim, you got a couple of cars there to go over.
Yeah, we've got for the exploring adventure, the Jeep Compass Sport, the hauling adventure, the Chevrolet Colorado.
That's what I was trying to think
the
of.
stylish adventure 2024 Mitsubishi Outlander. Those are really nice. For the elegant adventurer, the 2024 Mazda sedan. For the racing adventure, these things are really hot. For the racing adventure, it's the Dodge Hornet, and that is really a really fast car. I will tell you that the upscale adventure is the Kia Sportage. That's 2024. So we got a lot of stuff helping seniors. 8th annual Choose Your Adventure car raffle. Grand drawing is 1 to 4 p.m. on Sunday, the 27th, at the American Muscle Car Museum. So.
And thank you, Jim, for good information. We look forward to that. And you've been listening to Helping Seniors of Brevard right here on WEJF 90.3 FM, Palm Bay. It's 1 o'clock.